Thanks, Matt. Look, Tom Peregoodoff, Apollo Silver. I'm the president and CEO, and we are a pure silver play group with focus on tier one jurisdictions right now, with two fantastic projects in the US.
Tom, good to see you, sir. We saw you in London back in November. All well and good over there?
All well and good. It's good to see you again. And we've been busy since we saw you in November.
Well, that's what I want to hear about. But first of all, I got to start with the recent press release. I want to understand it, why it happened, what was going on. Future money trends in the news with you.
Yeah, no, look at, go back to July when we put the story together. We had closed the financing. And the feedback we had from the financing was that we've really got to get the story out in the US to both retail and institutions. It'll be very attractive. And so we looked around and FMT have got a fantastic exposure and following down in the US, not just from the US, but also from the silver side. If you look at their track record with guys like First Majestic and others, they're a powerful group. And so we got in to an IR and marketing arrangement with them. We got ahead of the game a little bit from the TSX approval process. It wasn't until January till they opened the file. By then, we'd already, as I've said to others, the horse had bolted. The TSX came back and they had some queries that we couldn't address to their satisfaction, and so we terminated the agreement. And now we're looking forward to how do we backfill that, because obviously we still want to ensure that we are getting the story out in the US, and so that's really the focus for us now.
So why did the TSX refuse it? What are they looking into? And is this sort of is future money trends going through the same process with other people, or is this just in relation to their relationship with you?
Look, I don't. I can't really comment on the relationships with other people. Although from what we have heard, there are some other reviews going on of the FMT file. But really, that's up for them to comment. What I can say is the exchange made some requirements for us, and we've dealt with the issue to their satisfaction, and we're moving forward.
Okay, but your company's dealt with it to the exchange's satisfaction. But in terms of what did they refuse, or what were they concerned about in terms of the services?
They want to ensure that any relationship that any publicly traded company has with any IR marketing group, it is not really designed as a pump and dump to allow insiders to trade stock.
Oh, good.
And that's fundamentally what they were looking at. And fundamentally, I think as and as the TSX understands, Apollo Silver is not that. We raised $53 million back in July to move our assets forward, and they see the work that we're doing, and we are moving forward. So they were satisfied on that front.
Okay, lesson learned, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Lesson learned.
And we move on. Right, so, and let us move on. So look, we did speak in November briefly for 15 minutes or so when you were over at the one-to-one. I kind of liked what I heard there. I'm glad you've come back on. So if you don't mind, let's start at the beginning for people who have not heard this story before, Paz, and get into a little bit more detail. So the genesis of the project started when, and what was the big idea? What's the plan?
Okay, so look, at the big idea took root probably 24 months ago. A pure U.S. silver story. I think the market was ripe for a new U.S. silver, or a new silver story. We looked around at a number of assets. Andy Bowering, our chairman, and myself, and Simon Clark looked around the world. We kicked a number of tires in Latin America and Mexico and parts of Canada, U.S., all over the place. And we came upon a private entity, Stronghold Silver, that had put together some very interesting assets in the U.S. They had the Langtry and Waterloo properties in California, and then a significant land package in Arizona Silver District. So In May, we started a conversation with them. That culminated in the amalgamation of that private company into Apollo. And on the back of that, we raised the $53 million. We purchased the Waterloo resource off of Pan American Silver. And at the same time have now become the party to the Langtry option agreement, which is the neighboring property, and then the earn-in agreement on the Arizona projects. Since then, we've taken the database that we inherited from Pan American and the Athena Silver guys, who were the previous operators of the Langtry and Waterloo, which we now refer to as the Calico Silver Project, because the two projects do abut each other. And, you know, we took a very solid foundation of historic data, Matt. We've got over 430 holes. We've got over 42,000 meters of drilling. We spent a lot of time verifying the data that we inherited. And we had a number of independent QPs that we had spoken to about doing our resource calculation work for us come to us and tell us that we didn't need to do any confirmation drilling, that they were prepared to declare a resource based on the foundation of data that we had. And you saw in early February of this year, we announced our maiden resource estimate for a Calico Silver project.
Yeah, you mentioned a few names there, which I think worth probably talking about. So Andy Bowering, I know reasonably well, met him a few times, and also Simon Clark, who know reasonably well. So these are good guys with successful track records. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about you? What's your background, sort of relevant to what you're trying to build here, and then we can maybe get into the project proper.
Sure. Look, I've been in the resource development and resource space for 30 years now. I started out in petroleum, rapidly learned the error of my ways. Although now I look back and think, but no, look, I decided it definitely wasn't for me. Got into mining and I spent 18 years with BHP Billiton. 11 of those I was overseas, always in the exploration, advanced exploration stage of the pipeline. Back in 2011, Eric Friedland came to me to see if I wanted to take on the Peregrine Diamonds story with him. And it was time. I'd been in Singapore for 4 years as a VP of exploration for BHP, and it was time for a change. So I left that, joined Eric. We took Peregrine through the resource development and early engineering studies at Chidliak, and we sold that to De Beers back in 2018. I stayed with the broader Friedland organization, Robert, doing some things with Robert, and met Andy Bowering through Simon Clark, who's a good friend, back in, now again, we're going back a couple of years when we first decided to maybe we should get a silver story together. Andy and I hit it off. We have a very similar approach. In addition to the work I do at Apollo, up until about 9 hours ago, I was director of Pretium, although no longer. We all know that's now been gobbled up by Newcrest. And I recently joined American West Metals, which is an Aussie junior with projects in Utah and in the Arctic.
Okay, that's useful background for everyone to understand. So 9 hours ago. Wow.
Yes.
Hot off the press.
Transactions closed.
Well done, sir. That was a good one.
So all you shorts out there, I hope you got your positions covered in the last week or so.
Right. Let's talk about the project in hand. Okay. I noticed in the presentation and also releases, you are keen to talk about ESG commitment. Now, is that in the context of the fact that mining is getting more difficult in the US? We want it, but we don't want it in our backyard? Look,
it's in the context of what investors are expecting miners behave like wherever they're operating. Okay. Look around any company right now and you're going to see a focus on ESG. And, depending on the company itself and the values of that company, the focus will be more or less. But I can tell you that, in California, one thing I take comfort from is knowing that they do have very high standards that everybody is going to be required to meet to get a resource development underway. And I think any investor should actually take comfort from the fact that they're going to know if ESG is important to them. Anybody operating in California, by definition, has to have a very strong focus on ESG aspects.
So you could have gone to Mexico, but you chose the States, and Mexico's track record or history in silver mining. Was it a case you couldn't find anything down there, or you were thinking actually no, the US just makes better sense for us given the sort of geopolitical turmoil in South America at the moment? What was decision making? Or was it a case of the first thing that came along? I mean, how did you came across this?
No. Look, it was more the latter rather than the former. We did make a conscious decision that we wanted to operate in tier one. There's the field, shall we say, Mexico, Peru, Chile. It's a big field. There's a lot of people vying for silver dollars down in those jurisdictions, and we felt that we'd be better served by differentiating ourselves a little bit, and the fact that the U.S. still is very much a tier one jurisdiction. Look, you and I both been in this for a long time. I don't know if you saw the news coming out of Chile on the weekend, but even Chile is now starting to take a little bit of a lurch. Now, whether it's a drift to the left or a lurch to the left, time is going to tell. But things are only getting more and more difficult. And I think that, for a number of reasons, the U.S. is a great jurisdiction to be operating in.
Okay, so let's talk about this money that you raised. How much have you got left?
Yeah. We've got Treasury right now of about 15 million. And we've got about 4 million Canadian and in the money warrants that are now coming in. They expire end of April, end of May.
Okay, so you've ripped through the money. So tell us exactly what you've done with that. Because if you inherited a bunch of data, but what have you actually done in terms of adding value to the story?
Sure. Well, look so of the 53, the lion's share of that went to the purchase of the Waterloo asset off of Pan American. So, there was that was north of 30 million US. Okay, we bought 100% of it. They've retained a 2% interest. So that's where the big chunk went, obviously. But since we inherited, the real focus, as I've said, on ensuring the integrity of that database. We've completed our own 3D IP survey, quite a regional survey over both Waterloo and Langtry. We've received the results, are incorporating that into our 2022 work program. We did some mapping and sampling out at Waterloo and Langtry. We had because nobody's ever held both properties. Okay, even though they abut each other, nobody's ever held both properties. So we wanted to get a consistent mapping across. So we had Warren Pratt come across from the UK. He did all the work for Pan American, so he's now completed mapping for us and tied together the Langtry and Waterloo properties.
Okay, so I think you're quite keen in most of your conversations to talk about this as a resource story, not an exploration story. What's that subtle difference mean to investors?
Look at right now. I mean, exploration stories, there's that exploration risk. You have the discovery risk, okay? And back in November when we first spoke, I was trying to encourage people to think about this as a resource and resource development opportunity. Even though we were only working on a historic resource, I knew at that time the strength of the database that we had. We've now confirmed with our resource statement that we made in February that yes, okay, in fact, tick, the silver is there. Okay, we're now, the risk profile of this project has changed. It's changed now into one more of an advancing the confidence of that resource, which we're comfortable we will do, and turn more now into an engineering type, how do you get it out of the ground now story.
Right. So it's okay. Understood. So it's about risk. That's what we should be thinking and looking at. It's also quite a big, big number. We're talking about 160 or so million ounces. 166, is it? Yeah. Okay, fine. Big. It is big. When do we get to start talking more about economics? Because it's an okay grade, right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it was fine. But when do we start to understand the economics?
Well, look. Let me just address the issue just raised. The way to look at this is not like a typical structurally controlled, very high-grade epithermal vein deposit, okay, which carries a lot of technical risk with it. If you think about a story recently that came out, these resources get restated quite a bit. My experience with Pretium, I think we've all been exposed to those sorts of stories. Think of this more as a Carlin style, okay? Think of this more, the type deposit is Rochester. Okay, Coeur mines Rochester right now, Nevada silver. They mine grades in the neighborhood of 16 to 20 grams per ton. Okay, our resource is, let's call it 93 grams per ton, shall we? So, again, it's a little bit of a different style of story. But to address the question, around when, looking forward, get the drills turning in March. We want to now convert. We got 3 objectives with that. Convert material from inferred into measured and indicated. And I'll just flag that the drill density we have right now supports an indicated. What we need is some more geotech information, according to Stantec, our independent QPs. And so we'll convert some material into measured and indicated. We want to expand the distribution of that high grade. If you look at the resource that's in our deck, and encourage everybody to have a look at the website, we've got some great information there. But you will see at Waterloo, we've got high-grade mineralization that is distributed out throughout the length of that. We want to understand the full extent of that high grade. And then third, we want to understand better the gold potential, which we have identified recently. And if you've been following the story, you will know in November we did put out a release that we have identified that there is some real gold potential there. So that work, along with the metallurgical work that we are underway right now, we'll look to incorporate that into a revised 43-101 resource statement in, let's call it probably, I'd like to think Q3, but reality is it'll likely be Q4. And that will then feed into PEA, which will commence late P4, and the results in early Q1 of 2023.
Okay, so that's the timeline for the economics that's come through. Okay, and in that work is not I say it's no longer a pure exploration story. So the amount of drilling is that you're going to be required in terms of filling in these. Any knowledge gaps you may have? Is there going to be any? Yeah,
we've got a drill program right now planned of about 15,000 meters across both Waterloo and Langtry. The focus will be on Waterloo.
Okay.
I look at Langtry as a nice asset to have in the portfolio, but really it's a brownfield expansion opportunity. It's got a little bit lower grade, and it's got a little bit more cover, so the strip ratio isn't quite as beneficial as you see at Waterloo.
Got it.
But so we'll focus the majority of that drilling at Waterloo.
Okay, so 15,000 meters. How many drills are we talking about?
We'll get the first one kicking off now. We've got a second one in the form of a core rig. We're just finalizing when it's going to start. I think given it's only got about 5,000 of those meters to do. So we'll likely look to start that at the end of the real hot period, so September.
Okay, and what sort of ore body we're looking at? And I appreciate the extent of it, but in terms is this relatively shallow stuff?
Look, at Waterloo, the mineralization comes to surface.
Okay.
Okay. And it's basically the topography works with really works with us in this situation. It's a fairly gentle but hilly topography, so the mineralization forms a reasonably prominent hill, if you will.
Okay, and is that going to make things easier or more difficult when it gets through to this sort of mining stage?
Well, I would think easier myself. I'm not a mining engineer, but we're dropping down rather than digging a hole. And then there's 2 aspects to that. If you note it, California has backfill legislation. Okay, if you dig a hole, you fill a hole. And we have been told that our case, i.e., we're actually just dropping down rather than we're taking the top off a hill rather than digging a hole, hasn't been tried under that legislation. It will apply, but they don't expect you to rebuild the hill.
Well, that's comforting.
It is comforting.
I was actually trying to do some numbers in my head. I think my brain nearly exploded. In terms of how much that would cost. Okay, so that's the kind of timeline through to a PEA. Understand that. Obviously, markets at the moment kind of interesting, a little bit uncertain. Precious metals. Probably main beneficiary of this. We've seen Goldman's come out today and upgrade gold to 2,500. What are your thoughts around silver?
Okay, so let me preface this by saying if I knew what silver was going to do in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, you and I probably wouldn't be having this conversation. Okay. However, look, historically, gold goes, silver goes. That's number one. I think also silver is starting to now build a bit of a differentiation with gold. I think there's more of an industrial application that you see in silver in the greening of the grid and the decarbonization of the grid in the form of solar panels. As solar panel prices come down, silver demand for those and other green technologies is going to increase. And I think, from a demand side, all of the forecasters are saying that demand for silver is set to continue to increase. All things being equal, that should provide some positive movement in the price of silver. We declared our resource at $23 a troy ounce. What's silver trading at today? I know last week it was over 25. So it is moving in the right direction. I think we were quite conservative. We used a 50-gram cutoff for our resource. The historic operators, both Pan American and ASARCO at Waterloo, they had a cutoff of 25 grams per ton. So, I think it's a fairly robust resource, and I think it's great leverage to whatever future silver prices may do. Right.
And I'm intrigued by this, the current environment in terms of, certainly retail and even the high net worth guys. You and I would have been talking 3 weeks ago about inflation, supply chain costs, rising costs to actually get projects into production. Of course, we've had recent events in Russia, in Ukraine, which, further complicate things, and make decision making a little bit difficult globally, but I think it all works towards one, uncertainty in the marketplace certainly for retail, trying to work out what to do. Do they hoard cash? Do they invest? What do they do? And if they do invest, what do they invest in? We're seeing less disposable income because costs are going up. Taxes are going up, and the discretionary spend, may change. It's a kind of interesting environment for company CEOs to worry about how do they spend their money, how quickly do they advance things, do they take advantage of the ebb and flow of the market, or are you a little bit more cautious? I mean, how are you feeling?
Look, I'm feeling fairly cautious at the moment. We've got a strong treasury right now that'll carry us through our current plan and leave us with a almost 2 years worth of burn rate money in the treasury. So I don't feel right now that I'm compelled to need to go out and worry about a capital raise. Okay, at the moment. On top of that, I think as we do advance the project, I think that investors they're still going to be there. I think this is a good story. I think that some strong stories will still attract attention, and I think we'll start to see people realize the big discount that we currently are trading at when you compare us to some of our peers with similar sorts of stage projects, but not quite the size of the silver resource that we're talking about. And as that goes up, and then I still have a number of derivatives at that point that will be in the money that I can look to rely on to draw additional capital into the treasury. So, if I was in need of capital right now, I'd likely be retuning some of my plans for 2022, seeing what was nice to have versus what was a need to have, just to be a little bit cautious. But that's kind of me by nature.
Okay. And so just, I know you mentioned it earlier, but I didn't kind of dig into it. With regards to how important could the gold, and I think you also talk about barite as well, how important could that be to the economics?
Look at, it's really early days for this gold story. What I can say is that Bircham mine that is on our property, it was a primary gold producer. Okay. It was producing, the grade is poorly constrained on what that mine grade was, but roughly, I think up to 9 grams per ton. Okay. Which is not to be sort of sneezed at. We know that there is a wide zone of a gold horizon that sits along the contact between the primary host of the silver mineralization, which is the Barstow, and then the pick handle volcanics below. Pan American drilled a zone 25 meters, which was running about 0.6 grams per ton. We know that horizon has been poorly tested. ASARCO back in the day, they didn't drill deep holes.
That's easy
when I say
say.
Deep, I'm talking 300 feet, right? They didn't feel like they needed to pierce that contact. Pan American did a bit of drilling and highlighted that approximately, call it a 500 meters plus away from the Bircham mine, that horizon is still mineralized with gold. And we know that another kilometer north of that there remains that horizon. And we know there's alteration along the contact. So, the significance of it is still to be sort of determined, but I'm kind of excited about the possibilities, that's for sure. The barite, again, interesting story on the barite. The first barite to support the California mining industry came out of this district. Okay, in the 40s they were mining barium at the Leviathan mine to support the petroleum industry. Barite, is an industrial mineral. I don't think many people know what it's for. It's not sexy like silver and gold. Look, I tell you what it is. It is a critical mineral from the U.S. critical mineral perspective. They import about 90% of their consumption from China. And without barite, you don't have a petroleum industry. There's probably substitutions you can make, but 95% of the barite that is consumed globally is by the petroleum industry in the form of weighting agents for their drilling fluids. So historically at Waterloo, barite was included by ASARCO in their feasibility study that they completed. And in the mine plan that they had, they were going to recover the barite. We want to understand better the distribution of barite because the assay techniques that they used historically were not optimal. They capped out because it's a major element. The assay techniques you use for trace elements like gold and silver, they cap out. And so we believe that the barite's been underreported. So we're not going to even think about what the economics are until we really understand the true amount of barite there. And then we'll talk to our metallurgist. Okay, so now we know it's there. Can we recover it? And all right, how do we work that in? But we'll talk about that in the resource estimate update and the PEA will address that.
Okay. Yeah, look forward to that. Okay, look forward to that one. Just in terms of the way that you frame the story, like I said, you were keen that I understood this as a resource development story rather than an exploration story. So you think about it. So in the same breath, what type of investor does this suit? Your story suit? Because there's this. If you want to be a speculator or if you want to be an investor, those are two very different things. People, conflate them, quite frankly, and investing is speculation, but they're not. So how do you profile your investors?
Yeah, look, that's an interesting question, and I would say that it is moving at the moment. I think right now that people that are in that speculation sort of end of that investor spectrum should really be looking at this story again because of that discontinuity between our resource statement and our valuation. If you look at, value per EV per ounce silver in the ground, and you make some comparisons to our peers, we're very, very undervalued. And I think that will appeal to those speculators that are out there. But I can tell you that from the institutional perspective, the institutions provided us great support. They took down a big chunk of the 53 million financing that we did. Let's call it roughly 35 of the 53 went into the hands of institutions. And these guys are patient investors. They're supportive. They like what we're doing. They're going to be around, I think, for the long haul.
Yeah, some pretty big names followed you guys on, and I guess the Pretium story it does you a lot of favors as well. So that's all good. In terms of the importance of this project to you now, how many other projects are you involved with, and also when it comes to this, how invested are you?
Okay, so look at our no doubt our primary focus is the Calico Silver project and moving that forward. I said all along, Arizona, the other project, I don't give it a lot of airtime because I said all along, I wanted to make sure that Calico was on the right track, and then we would turn some resources to Arizona. And I'm happy to say we're ahead of schedule on Calico. So we're now focusing on some resources on Arizona. Here is a place to get more of those bonanza type grades that people are used to from a silver perspective. We're just north of Yuma. We've got about 13 kilometers of strike length that is under our we have rights to, and we've got an exploration program planned there this year. We'll spend about $850,000 generating targets, so it's mapping some geophysics, get some good drill targets, and we'll get drilling out there in quarter one of 2023. And then from another project, look at now that we understand where these are going, the board has said time to what else is out there that we might be interested in. And so we've started to again go back, and we're starting to kick some more tires, again with a focus on tier 1 jurisdictions, looking at what's available in those tier 1 jurisdictions that might make a nice fit.
Okay, that's great. What about you though? You personally, in terms of your time, and also how much money have you put into this thing? How important is this company, Apollo Silver, to you now?
Apollo is obviously my number one focus. I sit on another board, and I won't get overboarded because I don't think that serves anybody's purpose. But this is 100%, where my focus is, and will continue to be until we come to our exit, and that exit will, I'll be there with all the other shareholders.
Right, and if you put money in yourself, or how have you structured all of that?
And I continue to put money in, and will continue to put money in moving forward.
Okay, what's the board hold in terms of its position as a percentage?
Oh, geez, I think probably total insiders, and if I broaden that out and include, well, in fact, I won't even broaden it out to include. I think the board and all insiders, we're sitting currently at about 12 to maybe 15%. The number is a bit of a moving feast because a lot of the in-the-money warrants that are being exercised right now are all held by, insiders.
Okay, Tom, thanks for coming on, catching up, and kind of broadening my understanding about what you're doing here, and more importantly, the timeframes as well. So appreciate your time. Stay in touch.
Yes, we will, Matt. It's always a pleasure. Thanks, man.